Hello, my fellow Protoners and PSO2 players. The recent PSO2 headline of February has brought to attention something that, admittedly, Gemmitators has actually brought up, and it is something that we should probably look at. And that is Meseta Inflation. Yes, everyone wants more Meseta, but more Meseta does require a little bit of effort. Now, I can definitely see inflation happening. It happened in base PSO2. Right? It's disgusting. Like, do we want to pay up the nose for all our stuff? Because people go like, we want more Meseta. It'll just build up into an endless loop, just as Gemma ended up highlighting in her video on Meseta Inflation. Now, the inflation could be bad. Like, if we were to look in right now the NGS player shop on this one item, this top one is a reasonable price. This one is disgustingly inflated. And this is going to be our future, folks, if we don't have proper coin sinks. Right now, the economy as is for coin generation and coin sink is reasonably balanced. What goes in to the system comes out of the system. Almost equal. They're almost equal. But if they're not getting equaled when the new Meseta or regions come in with the big coin generators and our sinks can't handle it, we're going to look at inflation where prices are going to look like this. So we're going to need a way of fixing this issue. But we also need to fix a few other issues. Because if this will be our future, and the RMT guys will love it. Why? Because essentially, think of it this way. If, let's say, 1 million Meseta is $6, and the inflation makes it so that if you want to buy an item, it's now 10 million, they're now making $60 because it's 10 times higher the price, therefore you're spending 10 times more in the RMT. They're making a profit. You don't want the RMT guys to make a profit. You want to discourage them. So the inflation cannot be maintained or be given. We have to actually reduce the inflation, even if it means taking some pain because you can't put in some effort for actually generating it. So what I'm going to be proposing is 3 ways to stabilize the market a little, but also hamper RMT and fix inflation in a nice little set of loops. Now, thankfully, the system actually does have a feedback loop, which means that if inflation gets too high, it starts correcting itself down, and we don't have to worry so much, although we do have to take a bit of pain here and there. But it does mean, because it's dynamically fixing it, as we add new sinks, it'll be adjusting itself, which is great, because it means then Sega doesn't need to worry about the third thing for inflation control that's on my list. So, what are the ways we're going to be controlling the inflation and also the prices such that they're reasonable? First off will be price rarity. So in other words, minimum price rarity on player shops. Now, unfortunately, what this means is that we will be paying more for the higher rarity items. Essentially, right now the equation is set the price to whatever you want. So in other words, a 1-star rarity gear has the same bare minimum price as that of a 4-star rarity gear. So in other words, when we put it up on the shops, it's the same 10 Meseta tax, pretty much. We gotta bump up the taxes a little to suck it up a little bit more, but also give players more profit when they're selling the item. So essentially what this means is that when you put up a 1-star rarity item, yeah, you could set it to the minimum of 1,000. But we got to make the 4-star rarity now much more expensive. And I figure the equation of the minimum price is equal to the weapon rarity squared times 1,000. This will guarantee that 4-star items will at least have a minimum value of 16,000 Meseta. That's definitely a lot more than earning, that small pittance of 990 Meseta. No, it'll actually be up now more closer to about 1,200. No, not 1,200, but 12,000 Meseta on each go. Closer to 12,000. That's a lot better than just 1,000. It's way better. It means now the rarity of the item now has impact and value in the market. Yes, it's being artificially propped up, but it means more Mesetas moving around, and also being sunk into the coin sink of the player shops. It also means that those that put up those items can earn more at the same time. It's a bit of give and take, and yes, it's somewhat pushing the market of items that people are going like, these are trash, we got to get rid of them. Well, yes, you can still get rid of them, but now you're going to be forced to pay a little bit more if you want them for upgrading your gear, and in turn, when you sell them, you get more profit. Although you will not be getting, the full amount, it'll at least help in stabilizing the prices and get the Meseta moving, especially on the lower end. I do know that the free-to-play players will probably not like it so much, but it also means that when the markets come in, or should I say when they got that 3-day shop pass, and they can cycle more items onto the market, they can get more in return, which is also a beneficial thing. Because now it means if they're going like, hey, I'm going to drop this, I got a whole ton of these 4-star items, or 4-star weapons and armor, they can quickly put them up, and they'll get a more profitable price for them, instead of almost the same price as Prim armor or Prim swords. So it'll help move the money around. Now, I know this second one is going to drive people nuts, and it has that one word everyone loathes, and that is taxes. Right now, the PSO2 player shop has a straight 10% tax. What we need is actually a dynamic tax. What this means is that the tax will change based on a number of factors. In fact, right now I only have 2 factors in for this dynamic tax. One is the inflation tax, and the other will actually be a price tax. So in other words, a price item tax. Now, all of this will essentially adjust and make it so that you can put up the item for what you want, but the tax will always adjust, determining how much profit you actually get off of it. Now, I have set a range for the tax of the whole tax will range between 10%, which we currently have, all the way up to 90%. Now, the reason for this is to stop people from being absolutely freaking greedy and putting up items for 300 billion or 300 million when it's really not worth that much. So this will actually get those who are more interested in profit to not be greedy and actually forcefully drop down their prices to a point where they can get profit. In other words, they don't want to make sure that any item they put up does not exceed 50% tax. Now, the equation that we currently have essentially is market price equals market price times tax plus market price times player profit, with the total tax just being 10%. It's very easy. So, what are we going to do to fix this? Well, what we're going to do is we're going to actually have 2 new variables come in. And since player profit is essentially the inverse of the total tax, or should I say 1 minus total tax, what we'll have is the formula will be market price equals market price times the inflation tax, close bracket, plus market price times the player profits. Now, how are we going to determine the total taxes? Well, the total taxes will be the inflation tax and the player tax, or, taxes based on price. So, how are we going to be determining the inflation tax? Well, the inflation tax will actually be based on ship total, essentially calculated during maintenance, over the ship total reference. This will be set by Sega. So effectively, this will be the inflation tax. So Sega can actually say, this is the inflation for the entire ship. So if people hoard their money, causing the inflation tax to go up, it's going to build up and they have to spend more in taxes to buy items. Now, it will hurt some people more than others, but that's where, again, the third option will come in. But, now, that one's very dynamic. Now, the price tax is based on price. This will actually be essentially like a lookup table. Essentially, between let's say 1,000 Meseta to 100,000 Meseta, it's the standard 10% tax. And then from there on, it's essentially an exponential gain, where the taxes will creep up faster and faster the higher up you go. This means that if you put up an item for really high expenses, like let's go with that 300 billion, and the taxes came up to 90% because they got super greedy not paying attention to the taxes. Well, it now means the system will deduct out of the whole pool 270 million Meseta, and the guy only gets 30 million in profit for selling the item. It means the inflation will go down because now the sink is so great on that one item because they didn't pay attention to the tax that the inflation will go down and people will enjoy it. I do realize that people will not be happy that, they put up AC scratch items for, 100 million, maybe even 50 million. But it's a way that we have to control the price. It'll bring all the prices down because now people will have to look at going like, yes, I want profit, but I can't put it up for what I necessarily want without losing profit. I can imagine that most people who are focused on profit will definitely make sure that they never exceed 50% tax. And if the taxes are adjusted weekly, what it will mean though for those with the 3-day shop pass is that they definitely will have to choose a price where they can expect the taxes to go up or down because they can't remarket their item. Whereas those that are premium get the option of going like, I can update my shop every single week based on the new tax to make sure I get maximum profit. It's a bit give and take, and we can consider it a little bit of a premium benefit of being premium. Now, again, this is very nice in that it will drag down prices, but lo and behold, it's not going to be a perfect answer because as taxes increase, I can imagine people will look at hoarding their Meseta, especially the RMT guys, because they know that the inflation's building up, it's going to be good. Now we get to the third one, and this happens to be a feature that's found in some cryptocurrencies. Yeah, real cryptocurrencies, actually. Some of them have this feature where they actually force a burn. And what that means is the currency actually gets burned away. In other words, there's not as much of it. Now, how to make sure that this is fair? We can't just go with an arbitrary number because that means those that don't have a lot of Meseta will be hit percentage-wise more than those that have a lot of Meseta. So now what we were going to be needing in terms of determining a burn is we'll need a threshold that Sega says each ship should be allowed to have. So in other words, let's go with 100 billion Meseta is the threshold. If the total ship Meseta count reaches that 100 billion, a burn will be put into notice going like, hey, there's too much Meseta, we're going to be doing a burn, and Sega will only announce the month. Yes, just the month. You will not know which of the 4 days of that week the burn will happen. It will not be announced. So it'll definitely encourage people to buy very quickly because it means they're going to be losing a ton of money. Essentially, proportion-wise, everyone's going to have reference to each other the same amount. It's just that the amount lost will actually be a bit bigger for those that have more. So essentially, if one person only has, say, 1 million Meseta and the burn is 10%, well, they're now at 9 million. Whereas the person that's at 100 million and they take the 10%, now they're at 90 million. They lost 10 million versus the 1 million where the guy actually had a little. This will encourage people to always spend and burn their coin through the taxes, which was mentioned in as the second part. This will force the coin sinks to operate because people will fear having lost a lot of money. This will also hurt the RMT guys because it means their vast stacks of cash and the cheaters that actually try to exploit and build up coin will always have to worry about this burn. Now, Sega should be deciding how much should be burned when it crosses the threshold, and it should be proportional to how much it's over, or how much Sega wants to put up as a formula. But I know a lot of people would be angry about losing a lot of that money. So in return, for the burn, what Sega should do, as the part of the third option, is that after a burn happens for, say, 1 or 2 weeks, all the augmenting and upgrading of gear gets giant buffs and cost reductions. So in other words, all the material costs are like dropped down to 1/10 of what they are. All the success rates are increased by, say, 30%. Well, in case of great success, maybe even plus 60. Augmentation gets plus 30. It means that if this were to be implemented and they went and there was a plus 30 augmentation and Sega did release 70% augmentations or capsules, hey, it means that there's a 100% guarantee with this burn where you don't have to spend a booster. You could literally get a lot of advantage out of that by it'll burn a lot of the Meseta, but it'll be an advantageous burn of the Meseta, where it's like going like, yes, we lost coin, but everyone lost coin relatively equal to each other, not just, one side taking the hit more than the other. Everyone got burned equally. They lost 10%. Not, it's 5,000. No, everyone got burned at 10%. Because if it was 5,000 and one guy had just started and he got burned that 5,000, well, he might be flat broke and having to then work on rebuilding it. Well, actually, no, let's not go with 5,000. Let's go with half a mil. Let's say that the burn threshold said half a mil got burned. It means a new player who just reached the half a mil mark got burned and they don't have half a mil anymore. Whereas the guy that has, say, 100 million, 500,000 is more of a drop in the bucket. So a percentage-based burn on every account is going to work. Now, admittedly, it'll have to be affecting the characters and the ship vaults. The marketplaces should not be affected, except for, it could then become a warehouse for cash, so it should probably be impacted as well. Just the price of items currently on the shop will not be hit. This is one way we can discourage people from keeping their money in the auction house, but also still keep the prices up. And it just means that people, if they know a burn is coming, they will probably have to rearrange how they're going to be selling their items, or take them down and wait for another go around where money's worth more. So, yeah, admittedly, this third option, I know it sucks, but it is essentially the last resort fixer for inflation, especially if things start becoming hyperinflation within the game. If we can have that emergency last stop, it'll fix inflation. I know Sega will essentially didn't fix it before in base PSO, and it actually hurt the market, and it still hurt. After effects of it are still hurting the player markets even now. So if I were Sega and I wanted to make sure that the economy was healthy, I would go like, look, we have to do a burn to get rid of this excess Meseta. In fact, just to make sure the tallies are fair, all suspended and banned accounts will have their Meseta set to 0 during tallies on these maintenances. Just so this way all that Meseta is gone and drained out of the pool. Now, I would also probably put out that their player shop should be emptied, but they would then be reasonably good still available coin sinks, which would probably be helpful in terms of still allowing players to get items, but they're going to be sunk in the next burn, which isn't half bad, and it'll keep on slowly being burned away to nothing. Now, all three together would actually probably be a very dynamic system, meaning that as we do level up and we do proceed to more rare areas and the Meseta drops faster and faster, it's not so bad. It means everything's more scaled in terms of weapon pricing and Meseta generation. So if all three of these points or ideas are taken, inflation will be fixed, and any new sinks or coin generation that get added later will be automatically adjusted by the dynamic tax mentioned as the second idea, which is something that we'd want, because it means inflation can't always skyrocket. It'll always be dynamically adapting. In fact, actually, after a burn, which is the third failsafe option, we may actually get a tax break, because I've set the inflation tax to allowing for essentially 25% off the taxes. In other words, you could start making a good profit because now the inflation's so low on the player market. So it encourages people to spend before and after the burn. So it is the optional choice for dealing with the inflation issue. Now, I do like some of Animana's suggestions, but I think we need something that's more long-term, and this is where these ideas come in. They essentially will fix inflation throughout the entire system, always adjusting. No matter how much people beg for more Meseta, there will always be a little bit of a dynamic adjustment. Now, if they keep on asking for too much Meseta, we're going to get more frequent burns, which people are not going to be probably happy about. So, on this part, Sega would have to be deciding, going like, look, we have to go up X amount every single time if people are complaining that there's too little Meseta. Just slight tweakings of the dynamic tax will fix it. That's all what needs to be done, is just a little tweak of the tax, or should I say maybe even parts of the formula, or even adjusting the total ship reference will fix some of the pricing issues. But we'll have to see. Now, I would say to Sega, try these three out on base PSO2 and see if it starts fixing the market. Because at least then we got a test sample going like, yes, it's working. We already have hyperinflation in base PSO2, so why not use this as a test on base PSO2, see if it corrects the inflation there. And if it does, then we can start looking at, hey, okay, it works in base PSO2, let's migrate it over to NGS and have it slowly fix and correct all the extra Meseta. That would actually work. So I'm hoping that Sega does listen to these 3 points and does implement them. Admittedly, the second one is a mandatory because it's dynamic. It's a feedback loop mechanism, always adjusting for inflation. So the second one is going to be key. It has to be adopted to be essentially last the lifetime of the game. If it's adopted, it'll fix inflation or adjust the inflation, or should I say player profit throughout the life of the game, which will probably be helping in managing the inflation which Sega is worried about at the start of NGS. And it'll help them keep it in check during its lifetime. Now, I do know people don't like the idea of taxes, but we have to take a bullet somewhere. If you're going like I need more money, well, don't be a short-sighted Ferengi, because if you want more money, you have to work and earn it. You can't just say drop more money. It doesn't work that way. Don't look at short-term quarterly gains. Look at the long-term health of the game. And I'm hoping, again, Sega does take these ideas and implements them. I've even given the equations, as you've seen, that should make it dirt simple for Sega to implement them. Now, if they do implement them, yay. Something has happened to make sure that inflation doesn't go rampant like it has in base PSO2. If they don't, well, they'll have to probably come up with something just as nasty or worse in some regards. I'm hoping that they don't come up with a worse answer, because admittedly the burn is pretty bad, but it's better than doing nothing. You never do nothing. Doing nothing is what allows evil to work its magic. So I hope Sega takes my advice on making sure that they don't do nothing, and instead of just fix the issue and prepare for fixing the issue. Now, I think that's enough of a little bit of a rant at this point. So hopefully everyone has enjoyed the video. Thank you, and have a good rest of your game day.